Vice Chairman Joe Miller to have our allegiance and our invocation.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Bow your head with me, please. Our most gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for another beautiful day. Lord, we ask you today and for the days coming to look after this country, look after this world. We've got a virus running through us and we need your help to slow it down and get it stopped. I ask that you look after our seniors and our most vulnerable to this virus. Help them stay safe. Help people realize what's going on, to keep their distances, to stay clean. We've learned to wash our hands now, and let's help us learn to love one another and to help each other from a safe distance. Lord, I ask that you look over this board today, the decisions that we're making. Help us make them in the right direction for the services of every citizen of this county. We ask all this in the precious name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Do we have any additions or deletions to the published agenda?
We actually have 3 additions, Mr. Chairman. We have a suggested add-on 5H, which is the Harnett Area Rural Transit System fare waiver. We have 5I, which is the National Service Recognition for 2020 for the National Service and Community Service. And then 5J is Child Abuse Prevention Month of April 2020.
Make a motion we approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
Have any discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. It's unanimous. Do I have a motion that we approve the consent agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the consent agenda as printed.
Second.
Second. Being that Ms. McCoy is on the phone, I forgot, I apologize. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. Do we have any appointments?
And just one clarification, he said as printed, it would be as amended.
As amended.
As amended, okay.
Number 4 we got.
Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. I got ahead of myself. Number 4, COVID-19 update. We'll gladly hear our dynamic duo come up and make a presentation, Larry and John.
Good morning, everybody. Just wanted to give you a little update as far as EMS goes, emergency services goes, what we're going on right now. All of our EMS crews are fully staffed. We haven't had any issues with any of them. We had a concern early on during this. We thought one of our part-timers had been exposed, but they've since been cleared. The code, the EMD code we talked about that we implemented last week, the 36, that is working really well for our crews. That way, even at the slightest chance of a respiratory issue, those folks are gearing up before they go in, and it's working pretty timely also. Our big concern right now, and of course it is across the country, is personal protective equipment. We're sitting pretty good right now. We've got several orders in across the country, but like everybody else, we're waiting. Delivery dates of late April, early May. So we're trying to stretch this out. We have had some changes on the N95 mask. We're kind of partnering with Betsy Johnson Hospital right now. We were talking over the weekend where we're going to be able to kind of decon those N95 masks. As we get a patient that's moved in there through the ED, our crews will swap out a mask, get a clean mask, and then they'll decon that mask. They've come up with a procedure for that that's been approved. So that's going to help us a little bit when it comes to that N95 mask. Still short on a lot of other gear. NCM has changed the way we order resources over the last week, and basically the hospitals and EMS and the long-term care facilities no longer go through the local EM to get those. They're actually going through the OEMS, through their ESF8 partners at the state EOC, so that they can address a lot of those issues. We're still ordering all that through our office as far as first responders go, but again, they're kind of down on the tier for priorities on that right now. We've gone ahead and pre-registered excuse me, for FEMA for Category B for emergency preparedness. We're working that. You'll see the documents flow past you here probably in the next week or so on that, so we can get ahead of that game for reimbursements. And as far as purchasing, of equipment that we're reaching out for now. We're doing all that with our current disaster line items that are in our budget. So we're utilizing those, and we appreciate those line items because they're really paying off for us right now. You have any questions for us? Yeah.
Larry, on the 911, I think you mentioned at the last meeting that they were letting people know if there was virus,
Yes.
potential virus.
Yes.
Is that for just EMS, or is that for everybody?
That's for anybody that calls, and actually on the law enforcement calls, when we look at CAD, they're asking the same questions, even for domestic disputes when they go out. They went out to a vehicle unlock yesterday, I noticed they even asked the same COVID questions
Okay,
before they went out to that.
okay,
So everybody's being protected under that one.
okay.
All right.
Larry, has there been any Harnett County businesses that have been redirected to manufacture safety equipment like you're talking about?
Not that I'm aware of yet, at all. But that's the big thing right now, masks, and especially with the release that the CDC did this weekend recommending that folks wear masks when they're out in public, that's gonna be difficult. Part of the problem with the PPE is that most of these larger companies have been redirected to hold their stock because they have federal contracts. So that'll eventually trickle down to us, but it's just gonna be a little bit of a longer curve getting to us, so.
Well, the thing about it, they didn't say mask, they said a covering, and everybody went the other way.
Yeah. They're burning up N95 masks and surgical masks. I see them all over the communities.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I think one thing that I keep hearing, one time you hear that everybody wear a mask, and then I was watching the news the other night, and the doctor from I think it's the Murrell Institute, who is the leading research facility that's working on this vaccine, he said 99% of all the transmission comes from hands, from touching. So what's the big deal with the mask? You know, if you've got 100%, you got 1% getting it.
Well, most of it with a mask is if the typical surgical mask they're wearing, you're keeping all that in. It's not going to prevent anything from coming into you, but they're just looking at people being out in public, that social distancing issue that we're still having, and I think that's what they're looking at that with the mask right now. And the hands, the gloves that people are wearing, they're wearing them all day long. They're
Yeah,
touching their face. There's John can
Yeah, and
elaborate on that.
if you got those medical gloves on, you don't do much with those, and they tear up. So, you know, the old, the Playtex gloves that you've seen people, and been to Lowe's buying these big rubber gloves that they're, I mean, I don't even know how you go around and do anything
Get
wearing
anything
those
done?
things. But, I mean, most of the masks, that are out there, I saw a guy, you know, he was cutting grass the other day, and he had one of those like a painter's mask or something, and I get that, you're throwing grass everywhere, that does keep that out of your face, but the little minute particles, it doesn't stop that. And the surgical gloves, if you cough in it, and that is to keep the wetness from your mouth in that mask. It's not to protect you from me, or me, you know, it's protect me from him if he's got a mask on and he's got a cold.
Mhm.
But he's not protecting himself from me at all.
Okay, that's what I thought, because he said, and which kind of amazed me, that 99% of all this that's being transferred comes from touching, and then touching your eyes, nose, or mouth.
And you'll notice when people got the mask on when you're in public, all over the place, pushing that mask around.
They're not
underneath the
used to it, and they're
scratch.
sitting there and they're pulling it up, pulling it down. If they talk to somebody, they'll pull it down and put it back up.
A mask are hard to find right now. What would you recommend making?
Commissioner McCoy, this is the only thing I have to say. Anything that can prevent anybody from catching this virus, I feel that we should adhere to it. Because too many people have died, and we don't want that to happen to Harnett County.
Anything else?
And my question was, masks are so hard to find, like in Food Line and that kind of place. If people want to make a homemade mask, what would you recommend on that?
That one, John?
I mean, you know, again, I think that.
John,
cloth
you
stuff,
need to come up to the,
I think the cloth that the churches and everybody are making, I know the hospital's passing those out in their primary care clinics and at the ED, and again, it's to catch the wet that comes out of somebody's mouth. So anything that's going, I mean, taking a handkerchief and, you know, when you cough in it, that's what the handkerchief does. You're catching the wet that comes out of your mouth. So any of that kind of thing, you know, from that standpoint, is gonna help if somebody's got that on and coughing and sneezing.
Well, I saw something interesting on TV. It was how to make your own, and basically, of course, you can't find paper towels or bounty towels, whatever. I'm not using that brand name, but it showed how to fold it, how to staple it, how to put strings on it, open it up, and make your own. And it was relatively simple with a staple and some, so you could make you one in about 1 minute. To do what you said, to keep your saliva or whatever
Yeah.
in.
And, you know, a handkerchief still serves its purpose. Take it out of your pocket if you're gonna cough and cover your mouth with it.
And I wanted to go back to Commissioner Johnson's request. I did get a text from Economic Development that we have had a couple of manufacturers directed to this equipment and then equipment sterilization. So there are some local businesses helping out with this effort, but we can't name who they are.
Good, thank you. Yeah, on the internet, it was going around about using coffee filters. Fold those over, the big ones, fold those over and hold them up. They seem like it might be something that would work.
I guess if you cough a time or two in them, but
Yeah.
when I pull one out of the coffee maker, it's about shot. I don't know how many coughs it's gonna be good.
Yeah, yeah. I think the biggest message still is go home, stay home right now.
Yeah.
Wash your hands.
Yeah, wash your hands.
Wash your hands.
You don't need to go out there.
I was just gonna, this is as of Friday, we've had 26 cases, 17 have recovered, we have had 2 deaths. Median age is 48 years, the age ranges from 19 to 88. We've had 14 female and 12 male. We've not gone through all of the stuff that's in the computer from Friday night and the weekend. Their LabCorp, I know, is still going 24/7 running tests, so we've got, you know, still a lot out there. They've not caught up yet. I do think the amount of testing has gone down over the past 10 days. I think medical community is, you know, saving the testing for the most severe cases, and I think for the most part, people are, if they're sick and they typically deal with it at home, that's what they're starting to do. I'm not hearing medical practices and the ED being overwhelmed like they were, you know, middle of March. So that's a good sign too.
I have a question. If a person feels like they may have the virus, do they go straight to the emergency room, call the doctor first, or go to the doctor? What's that process?
If they're sick and it's something that they would typically deal with at home, they need to stay home. They take your ibuprofen, or, you know, drink plenty of fluids, and because a lot of people are, you know, are getting over this. But if you're sick enough that you would typically go to your doctor, I'd call them first. Start with your primary care doc. Now, if it's an emergency, you know, if you can't breathe and you would typically call, you know, the rescue or go to the ED, then, you know, you could use the ED for that. But if you're sick enough, you would typically call your medical provider, call them, because they've got some all of them have got screening processes in place as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? Thanks, Larry. John? Now we'll get down to number 6. Joe, got any appointments?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, we do. Harnett County Commission for Women and Youth, Jody Hodges, would like to be reappointed. Historic Properties Commission, Nicole Hammer, would like to serve as an alternate on this board. Library Board of Trustees, Patricia Walker Smith would like to serve as District 2. Dottie Womack would like to serve District 4. And the Town of Angier requests to appoint Chris Hughes, Lee Marshall, Kelly Ennis as the EJT members. That is in a motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. Next is the nonprofit funding committee request. And what page is that on, Gina? Do you know?
123.
Yep.
That's 124.
123.
And Lucia could not be here this morning due to sickness, so Commissioner Springle's gonna, and hopefully Commissioner McCoy can address this.
We had 29 requests for $289,698. we ended up doing 19, I think 20 people. What we were looking for, we were looking for two things. One is the mission that they were doing, was it helping the county, and how many people was it helping? And the other thing was it doing something that the county was not doing? So we eliminated a lot of the ones that we had on our list. But we went through it pretty thoroughly. They had they instituted this time a kind of a questionnaire that you had to fill out for each applicant, and rate a number of different things that they had to do to qualify. Barbara, you want to add anything to it?
No, I think you pretty much said it.
Does anybody have any questions on any of the ones that were submitted?
Yeah, I got a bunch of questions. What happened to the rules that we were following the first 3 years we did this? How come we've got money going to federally funded programs?
Like what?
Your Partnership for Children.
Okay, Partnership for Children is not, what this program is for, is not a federally funded program. What they're asking for is that, let me get to it. What they're asking for is money to provide a program. It's called Baby Steps program, that is not federally funded, and it actually is a program that falls between the cracks in social services and the health department. And what they're doing is that they are providing families who cannot afford diapers, baby seats, environmental infant thermometers, pack and play for sleeping, wipes, and those kind of things is what this program is to do. And this is a program that I know we talked about in social services, that there's nobody provides this service. Also, in the reason we funded it this way is because even the Kiwanis clubs in Harnett County are collecting money, have collected money for diapers. There's a diaper, and they actually, Partnership for Children distributes these diapers under a diaper bank to people in Harnett County.
Well, another question I've got is, we had a $50,000 rule, and y'all at $92,000. Beacon Rescue Mission is never qualified because of salary cap. The Boys and Girls Club, we've just given them a place, spent a bunch of money refurbishing a part of the building and give it to them. Habitat for Humanity, we usually find them a piece of land.
We didn't have any land this time.
Okay.
And we haven't given them any land that they could use for the last couple of years.
Right.
So they haven't been getting anything from the nonprofit.
Let's back up to the Boys and Girls Club. Did they request 10,000?
Yes.
If you have the document that says who requested, because I talked to one of their board of directors members last night, he didn't know anything about it.
Okay.
Well, we had the paperwork to where they requested it.
Daniel Simmons requested, actually they requested $15,000. We didn't do 15,000. Is that who you talked to? Or?
No, I did not. And the person, I will say this, the person did qualify unless Daniel had done it, because he was not aware of it. So that's, you answered that part of it. But I'm like Jay, we just spent a lot of money over there, and they've got monies that's my understanding. They've not started drawing down the $250,000 that was given to them by the Womble family. So I'm just, some of these things just It makes me, makes me wonder, just like His Daily Bread, even though it's a worthwhile organization, I know they seek individual funds. In fact, I'm one of them, and I give them money every year to sustain their program. So some of these things, looks like they've raised money on their own. And then another question I had, and even though, I do have a Down syndrome son, is Special Olympics of Harnett County, $10,000. Most of that is volunteers. Would you mind looking to see what their $10,000?
Well, that's the amount we've been doing every year.
Okay.
What about the Ronald McDonald House? We don't even have a Ronald McDonald House in Harnett County, do we?
Well, we checked on that, and how many people was it, Barbara, that are served by the Ronald McDonald House from Harnett County?
They have served 48 families here in Harnett County.
That were served, and we went to them and found out who was being served by Harnett County, in Harnett County.
I guess my big question is right now, with tax revenues gonna be way off, retail sales tax revenues, from what I understand, we're asking county employees not to come to work, and they're either gonna have to use vacation pay or other types of days, sick leave, so they can get paid. And we're gonna give away $92,000 to nonprofits. What does that say to our employees that are not getting paid? Because not that they don't want to come to work, they can't come to work.
Well, under this policy, under the policy that we're going to be talking about, they are going to get paid.
Does anyone have any idea how much money we gave the nonprofits last year?
Yeah.
In comparison?
50 some $1,000, 56 or something like that.
Yeah. Uh, 2018-19 gave $60,000.
So roughly, we've got a 50% increase in our.
And let me say this is Commissioner McCoy. There were some changes in our policies as how we make the decision on giving money to nonprofits. And I think our attorney can answer to this. He streamlined some of the stuff, some of the things that we were doing, simply because we were putting ourselves in a compromising position with the agencies that were asking for money, on the nonprofit organizations that were asking for money. So we had to really screen it and make sure that we were not denying them just because of our own personal feelings. And also make sure that who we were giving the money to qualified for the money. And you all know that it's up to you all to approve it. We just made the recommendation. It's up to the commissioners to approve it. We don't want to find ourselves in an illegal or compromising position by saying no. And just because an agency have staff and they're paying their staff what we would say a lot of funds, that does not disqualify them. It's based on the work that they were doing here in this county and the work that they were giving to the county, or providing for the county through the volunteers that they have in these organizations. So it's up to you all to deny it or to approve it.
No.
But let me say this one more thing. Our attorney came to us and he spoke to us about these things. So, Joe, that is one of the reasons we changed a lot of positions on the things that we were doing prior to this year.
So, the attorney has just walked in, Ms. McCoy. You're telling me that we can get in trouble for giving away money?
No, what
Judge
my,
explained to us, and and Gordon, you correct me if I'm wrong.
Now, he's here, Barbara. He's here, Barbara, to explain it.
Yeah, let him explain it to
Okay.
you.
Okay.
We had to deny people, organizations based on the criteria that we had laid out to approve them for these funds. And I think he can explain it to you better than I can.
so the biggest reason I was brought in was because we needed to make sure we were compliant with the open meetings laws. Since this is an advisory board, more than 2 people doing business on behalf of the county, we're required to make those open to the public. So I came in to make sure that everybody was aware of what the rules around that were involved. Before we did that, we also looked at what we learned from last year based on feedback that we got from some of the nonprofits. The biggest issue was that as they were calling up and speaking to staff, there was no information that the staff could give them for why they did not get money, why they received less than the amount that they received. So when I came in, I tried to more provide education that we need to make sure we're adhering to open meeting laws, we're being transparent about how we're reviewing this and what we're reviewing. Furthermore, we need to be able to provide feedback to staff so that when we do get these calls, staff has an answer to give for why the funding was given in the amount that it was or why it was denied completely. While I was going through this, the question was asked, were there any limits within either the bylaws or the policies about what the threshold amount was that the committee was allowed to look at and authorize up to? The answer to that question is no. There is nothing in the policy or the bylaws.
Well, that's amazing. We can get in trouble for giving away money. Okay.
And if y'all want to, you don't really have to decide today. Sometimes you do decide before the budget is submitted, but if you'd rather this be one of our work session items during budget, we can move it to there, or you can decide today.
Oh, well, based on what I just heard, I got a motion. Anybody got anything else?
I do have one question, because when I was calling some of these last night, have we allotted the funds, everybody got their funds for last year? And the question I called was PALS. They said they didn't think they'd got their money from last year. And it's possibly have, but that was a question, because I called to find out why it was 7,500. Well,
We can check on that for you.
It's my understanding that they have to request it. Once they're approved, they still have to make an official request.
okay.
But I'm looking it up.
When did we make a rule that they had to request it after we approved it?
Getting it involved with the contract process and everything.
This is Commissioner McCoy asking the question.
Kim, did you hear what she said?
Ma'am, no, sir, I didn't.
So when did we start having them have to request it once they were approved?
Normally, before I can pay, there has to be an invoice type. So normally they would request the money. They would just, if they're approved, they would make a request, and then that chooses the invoice for us to disperse the money. I'm not, I'm assuming that's still how it is. Hold on, I'm trying to find the.
Well, I'm Commissioner McCoy again. I'm not aware of this change.
Well, I mean, it's something we've always done, Commissioner McCoy. I mean, when they were approved, they still would send something or have something saying, please disperse, or it's something that we would use as an invoice to direct me to pay out the money.
And the county manager's office does prepare those invoices, so I'm checking with Shannon, who processes that, to see if she did them all for last year.
Yeah, I think, Barbara, what Shannon's, I think, been doing that for the people that are approved, evidently.
Okay.
But Paul is checking on that.
Okay.
I believe she's correct. We just have to have something showing that it's a valid invoice. And if Shannon keys those, then she has documents and she attaches such that if an auditor were to come back and pull why that money was dispersed, they would see a chain of custody.
And we did pay all the invoices last year, and PAL got paid, the Harnett PAL and the Dunn PAL. So
Okay.
all of them have been paid for last year, or the current
Thank
fiscal year.
Over the weekend, one thing that, I guess, as they say, a light bulb went off. And of course, we've just discussed, this is gonna be a 50% increase over what we had done for the last fiscal year. But one thing that, the reality that dawned on me over the weekend is, between now and June the 30th, we don't know that number, how much less sales taxes are gonna come into the coffers of this county, which means we're gonna have to take a hard look at everything we do from now until June the 30th. And I realize this is a small percentage of our total budget. I get that, but this was symptomatic of some things I think that we're gonna have to look at between now and June 30th as we prepare a budget, because we don't know what our shortfall is gonna be on tax
Right.
revenue.
Right now, the projections are 25% possible sales tax revenue loss, but we won't know until June. So it's gonna be tough on y'all, because we have to do the budget by June 30th. So we won't really have those numbers. Right now, our sales tax is good, but we don't know what's coming.
Well, that was, I think I know where Commissioner Miller's going with this before we, and he can make his motion, don't misunderstand, but if we're gonna take this in consideration, I think before we would vote on this, we need to go back and look at these and give these people the opportunity to find out what monies that we're going to do. If they say, no, that's absolutely money we've gotta have, then we'll make a decision, I'm sure, but we're gonna have to take a look at a lot of requests for funds between now and June. So, Mr. Miller?
Due to the information that we've gotten today, especially from my attorney, that we can get in trouble for giving away money because somebody gets feelings hurt, I make a motion that we fund our senior centers that's in our budget already, and we suspend the rest of the funding for nonprofits.
So if I understand your motion is to not give any of this 92,000, any portion of it.
Yes, sir. That is my motion. Outside of the senior centers. Senior centers still get their money.
The senior centers are not in this request.
Yes, sir, but they're still a nonprofit.
I understand, but that's a line item budget, is that not right?
That's correct.
Okay. Do we have a second? Hearing none and seeing no movement, the motion fails. Do we have another motion?
I make a motion that we table this until we get more information from each of the people that have been on this request.
Do we have a second to that? We have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion on Commissioner Springle's motion?
You realize that you're opening yourself up to sit into a meeting where every one of these people are going to want to come in and talk to you.
Well, with the 10, we'll have to see how many they'll be able to come in X amount at a time, I guess, but we'll still go by the meeting's rules, but,
Can I make a decision? This is Commissioner McCoy.
yes, ma'am.
Can I make a motion? I'm sorry.
We've already made a motion. We've got a motion and a second on the floor. We're having discussion on that currently.
Okay.
Now, you
would
can,
like
you can
add
ask to
something the
amend the motion,
discussion.
I think.
If you want to amend the motion, you can, Barbara.
Well, I want to amend the motion. And amend the motion and make another motion, and that would be that the committee for the nonprofit organization meet with the Board of Commissioners and look through all the applications that we approved and reevaluate them. That's being fair.
I guess the correct thing to do is ask if there's a second to the amended motion.
Yeah, I would second that.
So we have a motion and a second for an amended motion. Is there any discussion on that? Hearing none, all in favor of the amended motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Aye. Aye. So I guess that's what, 3-2? So the amended motion stands. So what do we do to the original motion, Mr. Snow?
It's been amended.
It's been amended, okay, so we're good to go on that.
Right.
Gene, I assume you've got all this?
I have that as 4-1 passing,
Yeah.
the amended motion, correct?
No, it was 3-2.
You were opposed?
I opposed it also.
Okay, sorry about that.
Okay, next on the list is to consider resolution of Harnett County Board of Commissioners authorizing the conveyance of real property by private sale, Edgerton Industrial Park to County Attorney Dwight Snow.
Thanks, sir.
Good morning, Commissioners. What we've got here are what's on next on your agenda and the next item are very similar, so I'll cover them both at the same time. As this board has been made aware to the public very much in the last few years, economic development is a key aspect of what you look to do for Harnett County. More jobs in Harnett County, better paying jobs, better tax base as far as commercial and industrial is concerned. All these are things that we all want for Harnett County. To help in that endeavor, the Harnett County Board of Commissioners assisted in the creation of the Harnett County Properties Corporation, which is a North Carolina nonprofit corporation to assist the county in its economic development efforts. What we have today is a semblance or an example of that. On March the 19th of this year, the Harnett County Properties Corporation Board of Directors voted unanimously to make two proposals to the Harnett County Board of Commissioners in the form of purchase of real property sale agreements. One agreement concerns the private purchase of 5 lots in the Edgerton Industrial Park 2. A map of that has been handed out to you. And the other concerns the purchase of 11 lots in the Brightwater subdivision, Phase 3. In the Edgerton proposal, basically, an appraisal has been done by Valbridge Property Advisors, who were retained by the Harnett County Properties Corporation. And in December, their report came forth stating a basis as far as a fair market value basis for these properties in Edgerton and in Brightwater. On the basis of that appraisal, the proposed purchase price, which would be by private sale, would be $608,000 for the 5 Edgerton tracts. Now, these 5 Edgerton tracts compose 45.11 acres, and that would work out to around $13,478 per acre on that proposal. The purchase of the property would be pursuant to a purchase agreement, which has been forwarded to you previously for your review, which I would say is modeled on the same procedures that the board had done on a previous piece of property back in November 2018, which was a lot in Brightwater subdivision composed of like 4.1 acres, which was sold pursuant to the same process there. So this process is nothing that's new to you. But as far as the particulars on this proposal today, the Edgerton 5 lots would be purchased for $608,000. This would be financed by the county to the Harnett County Properties Corporation with a promissory note for $608,000 at the rate of 3% per annum as far as the interest factor. Interest payments, principal payments would be deferred until particular lots are marketed and sold pursuant to the provisions contained within this particular appropriation agreement, which has been handed out to you for your review. Once the closing takes place, the Harnett County Properties Corporation would take possession of these properties. They would market these properties. They would deal with these properties as far as the arm of economic development and trying to find purchasers for these properties under state law, basically. And again, they would be looking for people that would come in, would build buildings on these properties, would improve properties, increase the tax base, and the biggest item would provide jobs, good-paying jobs here in Harnett County. As these lots are sold by the Harnett County Properties Corporation and they retain the sale benefits or proceeds, basically, then they would come back and pay back these loans that they have with the county, depending on if you do it on a percentage basis. As they sell these lots, they would get release deeds so they could convey these properties with the sale proceeds, again, to be applied to the $608,000 debt. On the next item, basically the agreement would concern 11 lots in the Brightwater subdivision phase 3. The analysis of these lots basically came back as the basis for the proposed purchase price here being $1,567,500. That equates to $59,734 and some change per acre. Again, the proceeds would not be paid at closing. They'd be totally financed with the county in that amount, $1,567,500, again at a 3% interest rate, with principal payments and any interest to be deferred until lots are marketed and sold pursuant to the provisions of the sales and appropriation agreement that's been handed out. That's the proposal coming from the Harnett County Properties Corporation. What you should have in your packet in front of you would be a resolution, and in each situation the board would be basically in the resolution okaying the private sale of particular properties, whether they be in Edgerton Industrial Park 2 or in the Brightwater subdivision phase 3. In addition to that, the purchase prices that have been proposed would be approved as purchase price, with the sale to be pursuant to the terms of the appropriation agreement. And then the final item, you would give the chairman of the Board of Commissioners authorization to execute the documents if and when the property is sold pursuant to closing transaction procedures. I will say, pursuant to state law, if you approve these resolutions today, a summary of the resolutions would need to be published in the local newspaper, the Dunn Daily Record. And once that published notice is put in the paper, the transaction cannot close for 10 days. 10 days has to pass, and then after the 10 days passes, we could go ahead and close out that transaction and get this property in the name of Harnett County Properties Corporation, and do what our chairman and our board has always said, that they want them to be in the real estate business, not the county commissioners in the real estate business. That's the proposal. Do you have any questions, commissioners? Again, this process is one that's not new to you. You've been through this before. And I guess the obvious question from the public would be, well, if we've done this before for one lot over in Brightwater, what happened to it? That still has not been closed out. As part of that transaction, if you'll recall, the 4.12 acres, some infrastructure work had to be done, and that's in process right now. But I'm hearing from Harnett County Properties Corporation, they are very hopeful that that transaction will close at the end of the year, and that will include a purchase situation by the local hospital of that particular tract. So what we're asking of you today on both these line items is the authority to enter into these agreements pursuant to the resolutions that you have in front of you. And then we would need separate votes on each resolution.
What's the pleasure? Do we have a motion on each one?
I move that we, I guess we'll start with Edgerton.
Correct.
Move that we approve the resolution on Edgerton Park and transfer this land to Harnett County Economic Development Board.
The property score.
Properties Court, excuse me.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Now do we have a motion on Brightwater?
I move that the Harnett County Board of Commissioners approve the resolution on the Brightwater subdivision, transferring the land from Harnett County to the Harnett County Properties Board.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Next, we have proposed acceptance by Harnett County easement and railroad right-of-way corridor from Hanson Aggregate Southeast LLC.
Mr. Chairman, before covering that, I'd like to ask staff to bring Carl Davis into the meeting. Carl Davis is our Director of the Parks and Recreation and Parks Department here in Harnett County, has been a vital part of this particular item. What I'd like to do is just introduce it to you and then turn it over to him so he can answer any questions or give you the details as far as this situation is concerned. Part of Carl's vision and the board's vision, we were just talking about the vision as far as economic development. Another vision that the board has is the quality of life for its citizens. And when economic development in industries and that type thing look at Harnett County as a potential site for economic activity, whether it be a plant, jobs, that type thing, one of the things they always come up with is, okay, how's the education system and how's recreation for its citizens? Because if they're going to have employees and bring in executives and that type thing, they want a quality of life that would be good for their people. So that's one of Carl's main jobs, obviously, is Parks and Recreation for Harnett County. It's a tough job because it's usually at the end of the spending list, but it's one that this board has been given special emphasis on as far as future projects. One of the biggest projects that I think you can do, which is very relevant today, are greenways or walking trails, hiking trails, that type thing. Because you can see throughout the state of North Carolina, even with the coronavirus situation, where parks and places like that are closed down, walking trails and greenways are kept open. And it shows how vital and important these things can be. If you don't believe me, just come to Dunn over the weekend or either any day and look at the Dunn-Irwin walking trail, the rail trail as they call it. And you wouldn't believe the amount of traffic that's on that trail and people that are using it and enjoying it, basically. Carl has a vision of increasing the greenway network throughout Harnett County, whether it be in conjunction with state efforts on greenways that surround us. And this is one step toward that process. Back in the 1960s, Becker County Sand and Gravel Company, which was a Minnesota corporation doing business here in Harnett County as far as gravel and sand mining, they had an operation in the Upper Little River Township area of Harnett County close to the Raven Rock State Park. And as part of that operation, they needed to get sand and gravel down to a rail corridor, basically. So they went to the trouble of developing a corridor area, negotiated with local citizens, and over 9 different landowners basically procured a rail corridor from one of their plant sites to the town of Lillington where they could make a hookup to a major rail artery, basically. In doing that, they procured a 100-foot wide rail corridor and actually put a railroad line on that, shipping gravel and sand from one area to another over this corridor, basically. Over the years, the corridor became something they didn't need. It was abandoned. The rails have been picked up, but obviously the rail bed, which is a very vital and valuable asset as far as the greenways are concerned, still remains. Carl, and I'll have to give credit to local attorney David McRae, who knows very much about this trail and is on it a lot apparently, had the idea of approaching Lehigh Hanson Inc. That's the evolving corporation that evolved out of Becker County Sand and Gravel Company. They're now Lehigh Hanson Inc. They're headquartered out of Texas and have offices all over the country. But they went to the Southeast Region Land Manager for Lehigh Hanson out of Georgia office, whose name is Tony Garino, and approached him, Carl did, as far as would he mind looking at the aspect or the prospect of making a contribution of this rail trail to the county, of whatever interest they had in this rail trail, for a future greenway purpose. Carl worked on Mr. Garino pretty well, got me involved at the tail end of the situation where the decision had already been made, and Lehigh Hanson has forwarded to the Harnett County a proposed non-warranty deed whereby they would convey their interest in this rail trail extending from the water treatment plant in Lillington through Lillington Township up through Upper Little River Township to an area very close, not too far away from the Raven Rock State Park. That deed has come to us, it's signed, sealed, and delivered, and we bring it to the board today for your consideration in accepting this deed conveyance as a first step toward hopefully the creation of a greenway area over this rail corridor. With that, as far as particulars, because Carl knows it's like the back of his hand, I present him to you for any questions or comments you might have.
Any questions for Carl?
How long is this trail? How long is?
Well, it's about 3 miles. Is that right, Dwight? Between 3 and 5, somewhere around there. Obviously, this is not the construction of the trail. This is just the having the property, so we can, in future purposes, we'll have it. This is the first step in that process.
Right.
Congratulations. Good job.
Great job.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
So the rails are up, the cross ties are up.
It is basically a rock bed right now. So minimal construction. If we wanted to make it just a natural trail, it would be minimal construction for that. Wouldn't be a whole lot of cost. If we wanted to do more of an asphalt trail, obviously you'd have some of the sub bases are already there. So you're looking at a minimal cost. It's already raised, so you're not having to do so much of the build up of the trail. I think there are several places in there that might have some washouts and everything that we would have to do some repair to, but obviously it's already, it's somewhat there. It's, a percentage of the construction that we would normally do would already be there. We've already got a route. Obviously the connection of Raven Rock State Park would be a huge connection for us. For anything, it's a huge attraction in Harnett County, as we know from participation we had there over the when COVID-19 first started, how many people were going there, and then obviously connecting towns and other attractions with the Greenway system. So this makes that logical link between Lillington and Raven Rock, which is obviously great for us.
Now, how far are we from Raven Rock with this?
So that's a great question. Raven Rock's borders we're not far from. The entrance we are.
Right.
So we'd have to work with the state park system to figure out the best route. Obviously, we went all the way to the entrance of the park. Then we'd be looking at another extensive trail we'd have to build out. If we looked at trying to meet up with somewhere in their park and letting them kind of take the trail from that point, we're not far at all. I think we're about half a mile.
Nice.
From their actually property, which is still, that doesn't mean they have trails on that part of the property, but they do own that property, so we would be connecting into the park at that point, and then we'd just have to work out that arrangement with the park system.
Cool.
Great. Great.
Any more questions?
One other aspect before you take action on this proposal, keep in mind that they being Lee Hanson, through their LLC, Hanson Aggregate Southeast LLC, would be conveying to the county all rights they have to this corridor. And the question would be, okay, what kind of rights do they have? All their instruments are easements and rights of way for a rail corridor. So they would be out of the picture as far as their rights can be conveyed to us. But before we actually own title to this, we would have to go back to the various property owners that would be along this line and still work with them as far as getting their okay too. So this is not an overnight process. It would still take a lot of work and cooperation from our citizens in Harnett County, but hopefully they'll see, hey, it's been used for this corridor and I hadn't had use of it all these years, so what difference would it make? As opposed to Lee Hansen, it's to the county, that's even better, basically. And that's the premise that we'll use in working with them to get the additional instruments that we need to actually untitle to the property. That's what we're working for. But this is a tremendous first step.
Do we have a motion?
Make a motion that we accept this easement from for the rail right away from Hanson Aggregates Southeast Limited.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? I assume it's unanimous. Ms. Barber, we didn't hear you say anything. Thank you. Okay, looks like Carl,
And I'm
you're...
assuming as a follow-up, you would direct staff to forward some type of thank you in some sort of way to.
Yes,
Oh, absolutely.
absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
Carl, it looks like you're still up.
Yes, sir. Okay, the Harnett County Greenway Master Plan, as you know, there are a multitude of plans in this county based on parks and recreation, transportation, bike studies. We've got a bunch in the county that have all kind of been put together. They all have greenway aspects or trail aspects or transportation aspects to them, but none of them have really been put together to make one standalone plan. So what we're looking at doing here is putting together a validation of all these plans so we are able to prioritize these plans, make a you know, we've all got these corridors and these attractions that we're trying to get to. They may be 5 miles wide. We're trying to shrink those down into like a half-mile corridor. So this plan will give us that opportunity to do that. So we're trying to just get those more detailed routes and shrink corridors, and to make it to where we have one set along plan instead of trying to go off of, you know, the transportation plan, the UDO plan, the parks and recreation plan. We're going to be one that we can go by. This plan will allow us to kind of look at more things with funding, obviously, to get some DOT grants or to go after some other fundings where we have a more specific plan for those things instead of saying, hey, we got a greenway plan, we want to go from this point to that point. We'll actually have a somewhat of a signified route for those. So we met with, we put out our request for qualifications. 2 firms were interested. We interviewed those, myself, Brian Haney, Cody Price, Mark Locklear, and Jay Sykes interviewed those, and we selected Alta Planning to work on the scope. So that's where we're at with that. We've got a scope for them to come in and do that plan with your acceptance. That plan, like I said, it validates the system that all the plans that we have now. So all the ones that we've had, plus the town's bike and ped plans, we have all that. And it basically, like I said, it'll prioritize all the different greenway sections out of our top 4. They'll break those down into even a more detailed plan of the top 4 corridors that we choose. And it'll recommend, you know, then they'll start doing site reviews on that. They'll do a feasibility study. They'll do cost estimations, which obviously is a big deal when you start looking at funding of these things. Then also implementation process. They'll pay attention to obviously the roadway and railways and waterway crossings to make sure we get the best route so we don't have to spend as much money. If we're having to go through all the wetland areas, we're obviously going to spend more money, so we're going to be putting boardwalks versus trying to put it on the ground, which, you know, is going to be a whole lot more cost-wise for us. And eventually, with the feasibility studies, they'll identify all the land acquisitions, the right-of-way needs, the permitting needs, obviously a more detailed opinion of costs, and start looking at possible grants to eventually get us to where our top 6 to 8 miles of trail, they'll get us to where a 10% construction plan. So that's where we really get to that point where we start going towards these organizations to get the funding for these, going to put them on the ground. So obviously we're not putting out all the money. Obviously we're going to have to spend some money with the county to be able to do this, but we're not going to spend it all. We're going to look at all these grants and other funding sources to help pay for these. I think that's about it. I think the plan for that is $65,000 to get that. I think we all kind of felt comfortable with that. We felt it was a good price for it from what everything else has been going at. We're looking at some other funding sources to even help out with that $65,000. We haven't got anything official yet, but we know there's a couple that we're looking at to kind of help offset that $65,000 planning cost. Once again, this is just planning, this isn't any construction on the ground, this is just trying to identify those corridors, narrowing them down, and trying to get more of a feasibility study on those areas that we have there.
I got a question, and this really doesn't have to do with this, it's just more or less, is your section 1 is bicycle and pedestrian, and it's somebody who's never been around or had the opportunity to walk on a greenway. Do your bicyclists and your pedestrians, because I know a lot of people in this room do they get along fine? Is there any confrontation as far as, and I don't mean physical confrontation, but, well, I guess do bicycles and pedestrians, is there enough room on them for everybody to get along good? And
All depends on the type of trail and the width of the trail. You know, if you have a single wide trail and you have a pedestrian on it and you're trying to get a bike beside it too, it's not going to work. But if if we're looking at an 8-foot asphalt trail or 10-foot or whatever, it gives you that space to do it. It also depends on what's around you. If you're completely covered in trees and you can't step off the trail if somebody else is coming, then it's all about the trail planning purpose of it, and that's part of what you do here is you kind of set those standards for how you want those trails to be. So, we may have some maintenance, we may have some trails in this that are single wide, that won't be accessible for, road bikes, but it might be, maybe not even mountain biking. We may have to have separate trails for that. But hopefully this plan will kind of set apart all those different things where we do have some trails that are set up for mountain biking in there, and we have some trails that are set up for possibly even, equestrian, or ones that are more side paths that are more what you want for your bike, or your larger asphalt trails. Hopefully this plan will kind of get all of those things and kind of put them all together and make that plan to where you have all the different types of trails for all the different types of users. But yeah, they do work together, but like I said, it just kind of depends on the trail. If you got a 3-foot trail and you got a bike person and there's not enough room for both of them to be on it at the same time even for passing. So you just got to plan your trails out for that and make sure people are aware of what's going on, what they're getting into before they ever get on the trail.
How's it working with that trail from Dunn to Irwin? That's wide enough?
It would be. It would be probably. You're talking about a rail bed, which is very similar to what the Dunn-Irwin Rail Trail is. There's a little bit more wooded area in that trail, but we could always come back and cut some of that out in the easement if we were looking at doing that. But there's plenty of bikes, and I know Gina can tell you she's been on with the bike. There's plenty of room on that trail and plenty of width on the outside of the trail too, where there's multiple uses can be done on that trail.
Yeah. Because I think when they went from, when they got to Irwin, they went on down to the river, it's still wide enough.
That's right.
It's a nice, it's really nice.
You just announce on your layout.
That's right.
And they turn around and they move.
Yep.
Everybody's very respectful.
Yeah, it's very nice.
I didn't know, I never, where I live, we just walk in the woods. And then you see greenway with asphalt. That's kind of oxymoron.
When they added on to it, Joe, too, when they added on the Dunn Trail in Irwin, and went down all the way down to the river, they did have to clear quite a bit, but it looks nice. It's plenty wide, and it's really a nice trail.
Yeah, they did a good job of that. Most of that was funded through a grant also, so it wasn't even,
It goes all the way down to the river, and even has a platform, you can look at the river and all that kind of stuff. It's really nice.
It just depends, like I said, and that's a gravel trail, so that's not even asphalt. So you're going to get, in this plan, you're going to have a multitude of different things of saying, hey, we're going to have a certain amount of trails that are gravel, a certain amount that are asphalt, a certain amount that are just dirt, because there's all different users like different things. Some people love to run on asphalt, some prefer to be in dirt in the middle, trails only 3 feet wide, so hopefully this will cover all of that type of stuff.
Do we have a motion?
The thing first on the agenda is the project ordinance, and then second on there would be considering the contract.
Okay. Do we have a motion for the master plan capital project ordinance?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Do we have any discussion? Hearing none, everybody in favor say aye. Aye. It's unanimous.
Make a motion that we approve the Harnett County Greenway Master Plan Capital Project Ordinance.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. It's unanimous. Next, looks like Mr. Carl, you're still up with, for the big money.
All right, so I think there's some confusion on this. I don't think I wrote the agenda request very well. This change order is part of the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund grant that we got for the Government Complex Park. That project ordinance was set up for $800,000, 400 of it being county money, 400 being grant money. What this change order is it's still elements that are in that project. It is not additional items onto the project, which I think is the way I wrote it. It's adding to the contract we originally had with the guy who built the trail. I don't know if any of you have been on it, but the trail that runs behind public utilities, it runs from Highway 401 all the way up to the Ag Building. It's a gravel trail. He built that for us. We bid out for that project. This is a change order to add on other elements into the Government Complex Park that are part of the scope of the original project. So this is all part of that $800,000. This is not asking for additional monies. This is just a change order to be able to add those elements to it. Those elements include an 8-foot asphalt trail that surrounds the fields, the ball fields, a connector trail to the ball fields. It's a 5-foot gravel trail that leads down to the river that has a canoe kayak access. It also includes 2 overlook areas, one on the river and one at the trail that was built previously. It's already been on the ground. This also includes an 8-foot asphalt trail, which is a side path leading down Alexander Drive from McKinney Parkway all the way to the other side of the railroad tracks, and then from that point it would pick up a gravel screening trail that leads all the way down to the park. So obviously it is a large amount of money. It's a big change order. I think obviously it would raise some eyebrows, but it is all part of the original project. All the scope that we're looking at doing are all part of the original project. The only exception to that is that from the point from the Ag Building to McKinney Parkway with the asphalt trail there is not part of the original scope. So it is just an addition that I think kind of ties us into the government complex area that if we don't want to do it now, we don't have to, but I think at some point we're going to obviously want to do it for the connectivity of all the different county administration buildings.
So there's no additional money, it's all part of that same
Yes.
$800,000?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
How'd you weasel a change order with no money?
With no money? Well,
No additional money?
There's no additional money.
Yeah, that's what I mean. How'd you do that with no additional money?
Because it's all part of the original project ordinance. So it's all, the $800,000 that was given for this project, that change order is within that $800,000. So it's not adding additional things. It's all, I was either gonna have to get, somebody's gonna have to build these things. So it's gonna be part of that project. This is a change order for a guy we already have under contract to do these elements versus us, getting somebody else to do it.
So you're just switching contractors?
Not switching contractors, just using the same
So
contractor.
using the same
to start.
guy?
Yes.
Okay.
These items were not in the original bid, is why this guy was, if they were in the original bid, then he would have been able to just bid on the same thing at everything else. The original bid was just for some trail construction, which he's continuing to do. It's just we're adding these elements to the contract. It's just more trail work for him to do.
For no more money?
No, more money.
No more county money?
No more county money, but it's still going to cost us more. We're going to still pay him more money, but it's still within the same $800,000 that the whole project is within.
All right.
And part of it too, Commissioner Miller, we were gonna try to do some of it in-house to save money, but that did not work out, so that's another reason that we know we need to get it done, we're gonna have to contract it out.
And we have done some stuff in-house. I don't want to take that away. So this original project by the contractor's price was $1.2 million. We cut it down to $800,000 for us to do that amount of work in-house. Obviously, some of that stuff changed with some staff changes and everything else, people not being able to do certain things that we thought they could originally do. But it's still kind of working out in our favor where we're still able to do a majority of this work. Well, some of it in-house, some of it we had to contract out. And we knew all along we were going to have to contract out things like asphalt work because it's not something my staff can do. So there's certain elements that we knew we were going to have to contract just because we couldn't do them.
And the project ordinance, the original one is up there that he's referencing that you all approved.
Yeah.
And now this would be, using the rest of it, he'd only use part of it.
And we are a little behind on this project. This project was supposed to be done in October with the hurricanes that came in, and where the land is over there is obviously pretty saturated, so it took us a little while. We got an extension to get it done. We have to have it done by this October.
I'd entertain a motion if someone wants to make one.
I'll make the motion. This is Commissioner McCoy.
Now, second.
My motion is that we approve the Park and Recreation request. It's not costing us any money, any more money. I recommend that we approve it.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? It's unanimous. Thanks, Carl. Next, we have presentation consideration of Harnett County COVID-19 policy. Senior Staff Attorney Chris Appel.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Okay, so starting with the COVID-19 policy that staff has developed due to the pandemic and also due to the Families First Coronavirus Response Act that was passed down. So the main part of the policy is that part of the act that provides additional leave to our employees. So I'll kind of run over that portion of the policy, and then I'll go over the other remaining portions in there. But under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, there were two types of leave that become available to our employees. The first one is emergency paid sick leave. So for full-time workers, it gives up to 80 hours of additional paid sick leave. This is in addition to anything that they've accrued under our ordinance. Now, part-time employees are also eligible for this, but they will receive a proportion based on the number of hours they work over a 2-week period, and that's calculated looking at the past 6 months. So whatever their average is, they'll be eligible to that number of hours of paid sick leave. Now, they can use emergency paid sick leave under one of 6 options. The first 3 kind of have to do with the COVID-19 itself. So one is subject to federal, state, or local quarantine or isolation order. Number 2 is advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine due to COVID-19 concerns. And 3 is they're experiencing COVID-19 symptoms and they're seeking medical diagnosis to determine if they actually do have it. The next couple 4 and 5 have to do with taking care of individuals. So number 4 is caring for an individual who's subject to a quarantine or isolation order, or has been advised to self-quarantine. And then 5 is caring for an employee's child under the age of 18, if their school is closed or if their child care provider is closed as well. And then number 6, which we're not having to deal with right now, but that's experiencing any other substantially similar condition specified by the Secretary of Health and Human Services in consultation with the Secretary of Treasury and Secretary of Labor. Now, under 1, 2, or 3, if an individual uses emergency paid sick leave, they get paid their full amount of their salary. Now, that is up to not exceed $511 per day, or a total of $5,110. I don't think we have many employees that would exceed that anyways. 4, 5, and 6, the employee gets paid 2/3 their wages. And that's not to exceed $200 per day, or a total of $2,000. So there is that. So the emergency paid sick leave, you only get full pay for, basically if they're dealing with COVID-19 symptoms itself, 2/3 for child care or taking care of someone else. Now, there's a few other things we point out in emergency paid sick leave. So one, child care provider is someone, it's not just like a family member taking care of their, a grandparent taking care of their grandchild. It has to be someone in the business of taking care of children in general. Governor Cooper's stay-at-home order is not a qualifying event under this. And the other big thing is the Act exempts healthcare providers and emergency responders from emergency paid sick leave. And according to recent Department of Labor guidance, the definition of those two have been interpreted very broadly to essentially exempt anyone who works for our health department or for emergency services. That goes for admin staff as well. It's not just those who are out on the road. Also has to deal with our sheriff's department as well. So it basically exempts all of them. However, we did internally believe it would be, and of course with the board's approval, we thought it would be best to allow those individuals to use emergency paid sick leave for reasons 1, 2, and 3. If they're experiencing COVID symptoms, they've been isolated, self-quarantined, it's due to no fault of their own. Obviously, we want people to stay home if they're sick. We felt it was best, again, with your approval, we can extend that. The Act does exempt, but we're allowed to expand those benefits and include those individuals if you so choose so. We did put in here, emergency paid sick leave cannot be used intermittently for any of the reasons 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6. We did want to allow intermittent for child care issues. That's, your family members are parents who both work, so one parent stays at home Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then they switch Tuesday, Thursday, so allowing that individual to use it intermittently for the days that they gotta stay home. But for isolation, quarantine, it makes sense where you shouldn't use one day on, one day off. You gotta be at home, you're isolated, you use it all. And then you can also use emergency paid sick leave intermittently for less than full day increments when they're teleworking. Again, we all know teleworking is tough when you got kids at home. I've got 1 to 2-year-old. I know I'm not getting 8 hours at any one time, so that's to help out those individuals. And this emergency paid sick leave does expire December 31st, 2020. So it can actually be used for other pandemics or anything else. We had assumed it's only going to be used for COVID-19, but this act does stay in place until December 31st, 2020, just in case if this pandemic continues or something else were to come up during the year. Now, even though this emergency paid sick leave has been granted, that does not prevent an employee from choosing to use their regular accrued leave. So comp time, petty leave, sick time, vacation time, unpaid leave. Those an employee can forego an emergency paid sick leave and use those. And the reason for doing that is mostly for the child care issue. You only get paid 2/3 your rate. So if an employee wants to forego that and just use their accrued sick leave or whatever else, they can do that so they can get their full pay. Now, that is entirely the employee's option. Us, as the employer or supervisors, cannot try to convince an employee to use their accrued leave over emergency paid sick leave, and we have to make that, we've been trying to make that very clear to our supervisors, department heads, that is solely the employee's choice, and that's under the law is their choice. Another thing we did want to allow, though, for under accrued leave is under our ordinance, petty leave can only be taken up to 3 hours at a time. We get 12 hours, right? Well, 12 hours per year. 14 hours. Sorry, excuse me, 14 hours per year. You can only use 3 hours at a time. We did want to allow individuals to use up to 8 hours at a time, because again, we got people who have to stay home. We want to allow them to use up these accrued benefits as necessary. Again, you only get 14 hours, so it's only a couple days anyway. It's or not even 2 days, but we want to open that up to allow them to take 8 hours instead of 3 hours. So that essentially takes care of that part of leave. We do move on to the teleworking section. Now, just to let you know, we did develop a separate teleworking policy that deals with any situation throughout the year if someone's got to telework. But in this situation, we want to expand a little bit, and that was essentially if someone's going to telework, a request has to be put in by the employee or supervisor, but our requests have to go up to the supervisor or department head. They'll make a recommendation to Paula, and Paula has the ultimate authority whether to grant telework. Some individuals were granted telework obviously before all this went into place, so it would also allow for Paula to review any current teleworking individuals and give approval or whether they should be called back based on whether they're essential worker or something else. But that's essentially it. The teleworking policy that was developed just in general lays out what their duties, what they're supposed to do, allow the telework if IT resources can support it. Obviously a lot of people are teleworking these days, so we have to make sure IT can handle that. Not saving documents on their personal computers and so on. Logging hours accurately, providing a description of what they're doing, because it's hard to supervise someone who's not there in the building with you. So that's kind of the general teleworking policy, and this just kind of explains a little further in this COVID-19 policy. Moving on to the next section, which is the emergency family and medical leave. Again, that's part of this act that was passed down by Congress. So it's an expansion of the current FMLA act. And so what it does is employees who have been with the county for at least 30 days qualify under this. Typically under regular FMLA it's 12 months, so this obviously broadens the view to only 30 days with the county, and does give 12 weeks of paid protected leave. Regular FMLA is not paid. This is paid except for the first 10 days. The first 10 days are unpaid, however, they are allowed to use emergency paid sick leave or other accrued leave to make up for those 10 unpaid days. Now, the only reason an emergency FMLA can be used is for the child care issue. And much like the emergency paid sick leave, it's paid at 2/3 rate for $200 per day, maximum $10,000 aggregate. Again, another benefit that's allowed up to 12 weeks. Now, this is not an additional 12 weeks of FMLA and then you get 12 weeks of regular FMLA. This is 12 weeks total, so if you use any portion of your FMLA or all of it to this point, this is not available to you, or if you use a portion of it now and you need FMLA later, again, it's proportional, it's 12 hours total. It's an expansion, not an addition. It does exempt the healthcare providers and emergency responders. They are exempt, and we did not open up that one to these employees. And the reason why we want to do it for child care, for this or emergency basic leave, is we need our emergency responders, deputies, and our health department people here as much as possible. And that's the reason why they were exempt under the act, is they're definitely essential people during this pandemic. Just to finish out the policy, again, just very briefly, there's privacy requirements, so privacy is still protected if they're diagnosed with COVID-19, so it follows typical procedures for any medical diagnosis. Travel being limited, no outside county travel without express permission. All in-county travel needs to be limited to just to perform those essential duties. And then just some social distancing guidelines, such as reducing face exposure, canceling in-person meetings, doing teleworking when possible, avoiding unnecessary travel, controlling access to buildings, and so on. And then at the end of the day, the ultimate decision-making authority does rest with the county manager. Now, I'm happy to answer any other questions about this. I would ask, if there aren't any, or after all answer all your questions, I would ask y'all to approve this policy, but also not just approve it in its current form, but to allow us to make changes as necessary. The Department of Labor keeps coming down with additional guidelines on the act. Every day I feel like we're making a change based on something that they're come down with. There's new state mandates, federal mandates, and obviously stay-at-home order came through. We had to change the policy as we were working on it when the stay-at-home policy came through. So, but if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Can we make the motion as like a living document under that circumstance? It's changing all the time. I mean,
That's not what you're asking for.
Well, what I'm asking is approve this policy, but also to allow us to make changes as necessary. And I can come back to the board, obviously, and update you on the changes, but to allow, be in between board meetings, to allow us to make changes to comply with Department of Labor or any other state mandates as required. We've got to comply with those, so we would have to change it.
Be state and federal, right?
Correct. Yeah, if there's any, again, I don't know what the Department of Labor has come down next. We didn't think the definition of healthcare provider was going to be as broad, or emergency responder was going to be as broad as it was, and that forced us to change it because it encompassed basically everyone. So it's.
But if they come down with a mandate, they don't expect you to do it automatically. I mean, we meet every 2 weeks unless we not have it.
Right. Well, as of right now, they're not. So the act went into effect April 1st. So we had to post it, let employees know about this. There's no enforcement action, I believe, for the first 2 weeks that this is in place. So while we're trying to be as compliant as possible, Department of Labor is not going to come down on anyone for the first couple of weeks.
So you need a motion to approve this policy and allow the county to adjust as
Just
as required by the state or federal.
correct.
But limited just to these mandates due to the.
Limited to any further mandates from Department of Labor, from the federal or state government
For coronavirus. stuff.
for coronavirus,
So
correct.
we had just so y'all know, we had this policy established right after all this broke out, but it kept changing. And that's why we finally feel like things have leveled out and we finally have a policy we feel good about unless the state or feds change it again. But so far, we feel like it's got everything in it. And that's why we're here for your approval today.
Right. Internally, I think we worked out kind of what we wanted to. And again, if you approve where we expanded
To answer your question, Commissioner Miller, I think as long as it would be living, as long as it was limited to COVID.
COVID-19 for mandates from
With an
federal or state
understanding that
agencies.
if they make those changes at the next available meeting, he'll advise you or otherwise they'll advise you.
And I will definitely let you know before we make any changes known to the employees. We'll definitely get your approval either via email or phone call.
What would you list, as you make the motion, would you make that motion, if I made it as a living document, only to COVID-19, is that way you'd make the motion?
Exactly.
Okay. I make the motion that we approve policy as a living document as long as it is, any amendments are made to COVID-19.
Do we have a second?
I second.
I have 2 seconds. Any discussion? Everybody in favor say aye. Aye. It's unanimous.
Hopefully there will be a COVID-20.
Hopefully not.
Presentation
further
and consideration of proposed personnel order changes, Senior Staff Attorney Chris Appel.
Okay, so we have a number of changes to our personnel ordinance, kind of bring it more up to speed. So I'll go through this. I'm gonna skip one part of here, the shared leave policy that's in here, and I'll let you know, but Thomas kind of took the lead on that one, so when I'm done going over my parts, I'm gonna bring Thomas in here to discuss the shared leave policy. But I'll be discussing the grievance, disciplinary action, and separations department, departures and reinstatements. So the document that went out, to make changes, I pulled out the portions from the personnel ordinance that are going to be changed, and then to help kind of go through, I numbered these pages. So the page numbers of all this are not the page numbers from the actual personnel ordinance. It's just for purposes of following along. I won't go over every single red line. I'll just try to hit the main points on here, but feel free to stop me at any time if any questions or if I'm going too fast. Just to begin with, in the definitions, a precursor. So the main thing in the disciplinary action policy that we changed is changing the definition of adverse action and including a definition for disciplinary action. Under the current personnel ordinance, adverse action essentially was disciplinary action. It encompasses anything, warnings, oral warnings, written warnings, suspensions, and so on. We've narrowed adverse action, and I'll explain later why we did that, but we narrowed adverse action down to it's a type of disciplinary action that results in employee suspension, not including investigatory suspension. And the reason for that is investigatory suspension is temporary and they're paid. But it doesn't include that. Involuntary demotion, dismissal, involuntary resignation, or termination. So as you see, adverse action basically deals with anything that changes the employee's employment status in some way or affects their employment status. And then we added a definition further down on page 1 to include disciplinary action, and now that's the new broader version. It's a corrective measure taken by the county to improve or address the employee's performance. And so that encompasses adverse actions, but also includes oral warnings, written warnings, and so on, anything that doesn't change the employee status. Moving on to page 2. The bottom of page 2, I'll just point this out very briefly under grievance. I did add you can grieve if you've been separated from employment due to a reduction in force or disability addressed in Article 8. So that just expands why a person can file a grievance. Just moving on, those other changes are just cleaning some of the language up. And throughout here, a number of these pages where it says adverse action, it was changed to disciplinary action. So I'm not going to hit on every page where there's that change, but just be aware that anytime it generally said adverse action has been changed to discipline, just to say that if there's any violation, it can lead to disciplinary action, which may include the adverse action. All right, so we'll move on to, skip shared leave, we'll move on to page 12. If you want to scroll down. So Article 8, separations, departures, and reinstatements. So under suspension, clarify that suspensions without pay shall not exceed 30 calendar days, and the reason for that is with employment security. If you're not paid for 30 days, at that point you're considered to be separated from employment. So we just want to clarify that after 30 days of suspension of unpaid, we either got to bring you back or we got to officially separate. And then under 3, an employee suspended for reasons stated above, they can appeal their suspension in accordance with grievance and appeal policy, which I'll go over. So we'll move on from there. Everything else is kind of a cleanup portion. Now, going into voluntary resignation on page 13, if an employee gives their 2-week notice and the county ends up accepting it, it's going to be the county's sole discretion whether to allow an employee to rescind the resignation. That does happen every once in a while. Either they have another job that fell through, they change their mind for a reason, but it's want to make it clear it's our decision whether to allow someone to rescind a notice or whether they'll still be considered a voluntary resignation. I also want to include in there that we reserve the right to pay the individual for their 2-week notice in lieu of them working that 2-week notice, and there's various reasons as to why you'd want someone to just stay at home, and that will pay them instead of having them work. Under dismissal, you'll see a lot of things were deleted. It's not that we're taking that completely out, but it's addressed in the discipline section, so this is just to reduce the amount of paper. So don't need to address it in 2 different sections. So that essentially takes care of that article of the ordinance. So we'll move on to disciplinary action.
Chris, can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner McCoy, in your personnel audits, do you have anything on dealing with sexual harassment?
Yes, ma'am. And once I get through the disciplinary action part and the grievance, I am going to address the unlawful workplace harassment policy changes, which does include sexual harassment.
Okay, good.
Okay, so I'll move on to the Article 9 disciplinary action policy. In the first statement, just want to make it clear that any county employee, regardless of occupation, position, or profession, is subject to disciplinary action. And again, you'll see language change from adverse action, disciplinary action throughout. And did want to add in throughout here that it's not just the county manager or department head that can execute disciplinary action, but also the assistant county manager. And the reason for that is our assistant county managers look over certain departments, and they're the fact they're a supervisor, but their title's not a supervisor, so we had to add that in there to make it clear that they are a supervisor, they can issue discipline. So under section 4 on page 16, responsibilities, department head, supervisor, assistant county manager, that supervisors can issue disciplinary action. However, for adverse action, supervisors cannot issue that type of action. It has to be department head, assistant county manager, or county manager. And the reason for that is, again, adverse actions dealing with the change in employment status that should be left up to the highest levels. Moving on to page 17, and I'll just say this first. When we're reviewing all these personnel ordinance changes, I did want to address some questions of what if the HR manager or county manager are the subject of these issues. We addressed it in another policy, so I'm trying to be consistent here as well. So under discipline action, under the top page 17, if the HR director is subject to disciplinary action, the legal department or legal counsel retained for disciplinary matter shall review the disciplinary documents, because the default is the HR manager reviews all actions. Again, the ordinance was never clear of what happens if the HR manager is the subject of that, so we provided clarification, and now you'll see that in other sections as well. Section 6, disciplinary conferences was deleted. The reason for that is it's been changed to adverse action conferences, and that's going to be found later in this article, and I'll address that when we get to it. But the purpose is it's to streamline the process. We felt like a conference was not necessary if you're just receiving an oral warning or a written warning. We felt that a disciplinary conference was not really necessary until you're facing a change of status in your employment. So, for clarification purposes, under B, discipline for unsatisfactory job performance. So it's typically a 3-step process. Did you say oral, first written warning and final written warning? So I want to make it clear on number 1, it's a documented oral warning. So we're not talking about a department head supervisor bringing an employee in to say, having an informal conversation saying, hey, you need to improve here, but it's not documented. It's just, that's not part of this process. It's not until have a formal meeting with you and I document the oral warning with you that's the first step. So I just want to provide some clarification. And then moving on to just page 18, again, changing up some of the language, cleaning some of it up. So continue on to page 19. Added a few more examples at the end of the list on page 19, such as insubordination, willful violation of known or written policies, rules, or procedures can lead to discipline. Section 6 is the big change, adverse action conferences. Again, just limiting these conferences to a change in employment status type of discipline. And we did want to add in there that an employee can be immediately terminated and shall not be entitled to an adverse action conference if the county manager determines that an employee's conduct endangers or will endanger the lives or property of employees or other members of the county, or engages in other gross misconduct which necessitates the immediate termination of the employee. If they're a real threat, there's no reason to keep them on and go through this process of a conference. They need to be terminated immediately. And I would like to think that if that's going to happen without a conference, it's pretty clear that, that they need to be terminated immediately. So moving on to Article 10, the grievance and appeal policy. On page 20, just bringing some things up to date with current law, just including you can't be discriminated against genetic information, political affiliation, disability, and so on, just to bring the terms up to date. And you'll see that further on that page, down that page. Okay, so moving on to page 21, the steps of going through grievance. So what I've taken out is if a grievance is filed, I've taken out filing it with the supervisor or department head. It should just go to the HR director just to streamline the process. And then again, if the grievance is related to the HR director, the grievance shall be filed with the assistant county manager designated by the county manager. And if the grievance is related to alleged acts by the county manager, the employee shall file the grievance with the county attorney or counsel retained to review the matter. So that's, again, what if situation. Would hope that that won't have to happen. We have to account for all possibilities, and so that's why that was added in there. Step 2, once that is received, did want to expand it from giving a response from 5 days to 10 days, and the reason for that is in case HR director or someone else is out for that week or they just need more time to review because it's a complicated matter. Just want to make sure that a review is properly done and don't want to run into this 5-day timeline. Again, if the grievance is related to the HR director, the assistant county manager designated by the county manager shall meet with the employee and issue the written response. And then for the county manager, the county attorney or counsel retained shall meet with the employee to issue the written response. Under step 3, again, just adding an assistant county manager in there. If the individual is unhappy with HR director or assistant county manager's decision, it can be go up to, they can appeal that. And if the grievance is related to alleged acts by the county manager, and so the appeal packet goes to the county manager, excuse me. And if the grievance is related to the county manager, the appeal packet shall be submitted to the chairman of the board. Under step 4, so the county manager will review the documents, hear from all parties, and then issue a written determination again within 10 business days, again allowing enough time. I did want to take out this portion talking about a grievance committee. First off, I don't think it's ever been used, and I felt like it'd be better to get rid of a grievance committee. I think it's probably a mistake to bring in other employees dealing with a sensitive personnel issue, so I think we need to limit it to just the county manager. And then if the grievance is related to the alleged acts of the county manager, the Board of Commissioners shall hear the appeal and issue the decision. So step 5, the original step 5 was deleted again because the grievance committee has been removed, so that step is no longer necessary. So the new step 5 is the county manager and the HR director shall notify the employee of the final decision of the appeal. And then if the chairman of the board renders a written decision, the county attorney or counsel retained shall notify the employee of the board's decision. And in step 6, this is just dealing with employees who are subject to Office of State Human Resources, and that's just to update the correct office from State Personnel Commission to Office of State Human Resources. So, and then other portions of this that are in this packet are forms. Again, just updating terms from adverse action to disciplinary action. Shared leave that Thomas will address. Disciplinary action report, again, just brings up to date with the policy. And then a few other changes in there, just again, updating from adverse action to disciplinary action. So that takes care of those portion of the personnel ordinance. I'll move on to unlawful workplace harassment policy in a second, but before I do so, are there any questions about the disciplinary action policy or grievance?
This is Commissioner McCoy.
Yes, ma'am.
I have questions about some clarity on discriminating policies. And I didn't really hear that much on sexual harassment.
Yes, ma'am. I'm about to cover the sexual harassment next. I just want, before I moved on to that next one, I just want to know if there was any questions regarding just the general disciplinary action policy or the grievance. If not, as I said, I can go over the sexual harassment part.
I got you. It's not very clear over the phone. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I know it's a little bit different than normal. So, okay, I'll move on. So, next section of the personnel ordinance. Okay, the unlawful workplace harassment policy. In conjunction with HR, I have updated this policy. First, delete that first section just because there is no full policy in Appendix B, so it's just making a clarification that we're getting rid of that. Just clarifying in that that first paragraph, violation of this policy may result in disciplinary action up to and including termination, along with any other penalties under federal, state, or local law. So just want to make it clear of what can happen for a violation of this. The next paragraph just brings up to date with current laws, current terminology. Sexual harassment, it's a specific type of unlawful workplace harassment. It's defined, and the clarification that we add in here, it's defined by federal guidelines as unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature, and then go into the 3 categories of what it can be. So number 1, submission to such conduct is made either explicitly or implicitly as a condition of the employee's employment. Submission to or rejection of such conduct by an employee is used as the basis for employment decisions affecting such employee, or such conduct as the purpose or the effect of unreasonably interfering with an employee's work performance or creating an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. So it provides further clarification of what sexual harassment is. And then moving on to the next change, there's a varieties of prohibited acts of sexual harassment that can take range from subtle pressure to physical assault. And so we included a number of examples of what sexual harassment can be. I won't read every bullet point in there, but we greatly expanded on what sexual harassment is to make it clear. So under policy procedures on the next page, a report, if someone witnesses or is subject of unlawful workplace harassment, they're encouraged to report the situation to their department head or directly to the HR director. Upon if someone does complain of possible unlawful workplace harassment, the supervisor, department head, or HR director shall direct the alleged victim to complete the unlawful workplace harassment form found in Appendix B. This is a new form that I wrote specifically for this policy. Wanted to change it from under the old policy where the supervisor, department head, or HR director takes the report to the actual employee, writes down everything to make it clear so there's no miscommunication, there's no misunderstanding. The employee completely fills out and tells their side of the events. And that form can be turned into supervisor, department head, or HR director, but if the supervisor or department head receives it, they must forward it to the HR director within 3 working days of completion of that form. Again, the what if the HR director is the alleged offender, the alleged event, and an unlawful workplace harassment form shall be provided to the legal department for review. And again, clarification under B is, if the HR director can't review it, then the legal department retaining outside counsel shall investigate it. Under C, well, for one, there's a possible 30-day extension that can be granted to complete the investigation. Obviously, we would like it to be done within 15 days, but due to the complexity of the matter, it can be expanded up to 30 days to allow to complete the investigation thoroughly. If the county manager is the alleged offender, the report shall be provided to the Board of Commissioners, and any extension of the investigation shall be granted upon request by the board. So typically, the county manager can provide the extension, but again, the board can as well if the county manager has been accused. Under Part E, and that has to deal with notification upon completion. If the county manager is the alleged offender, the results of the investigation shall be reported to the Board of Commissioners, and the board, along with the HR director, legal department, or outside counsel, shall ensure that appropriate actions are taken. So the next section on there is retaliation. Just wanted to expand on there of what retaliation is, and that it will not be tolerated in any way. Under the current version, it says retaliatory actions not sanctioned by the HR department or county manager is not allowed. I don't believe there's any retaliatory action that can be sanctioned, so it's just removing that language. And if there is any retaliatory action against an individual for making a complaint, that individual shall be subject to disciplinary action. And then that next part has been deleted because that was moved to the front to let individuals know what a violation of the policy can result in. To go along with that unlawful workplace harassment policy, as I mentioned, there's an unlawful workplace harassment form that I developed. It's a series of questions to write down who's involved, the alleged harassment, locations, allowing them to describe in detail the acts, and they can attach additional sheets as necessary, identify employees and witnesses, answering some questions, and then having them sign it. So this will better allow us to get a full picture of what the alleged acts so that the county can properly investigate it. But also commits the individual that having them sign it, that what they're saying is true to the best of their knowledge. So it's an acknowledgement that they're writing this down. So there's no miscommunication of a supervisor or department head writing down what they're saying is this is their words, they're putting it down, so it protects us as a county as well. So, I believe that covers that. Happy to answer any questions regarding that. Okay. Well, I believe that takes care of my part. So the last part of the personnel ordinance change will be the shared leave policy, and I'll let Thomas take care of that one.
Good morning again. So the last part that I'm going to discuss is the shared leave policy. We started looking at this originally kind of as part of the global look at these personnel ordinance changes. When looking at the share of leave policy, the organization seemed to be off. Sometimes we were talking about how to apply, but we hadn't even talked about who was eligible. So we were just trying to make this easier from the standpoint of an employee that's trying to look this up, to figure out who's eligible, who's not eligible, how do you actually apply, what other steps are involved with this, and where you can be referred to find out what other steps you need to be taking. So really on that first page there, what we're looking at.
What page in the,
Chris, what page in there?
Page 9, isn't it?
Page 9 in the
This packet.
Yeah, page 9, section 8.
I'm not sure if it's the same page. It is, it's page 9 on this one as well. Okay. Well, that's lucky it's lined up that way. So on page 9, what we're pretty much looking at is that we are giving just an overall view of what the shared leave policy is. I know in the past we have used a banked leave system, but now we're using more of a direct leave. So HR will put out a email to all employees saying, hi, somebody has requested shared leave, and now whether they agree to provide information about that or not, HR has gone ahead and gotten the okay to do that, and they'll put out just real quickly what it is. Like this individual, maybe Thomas Royer in legal has X issue going on, has requested shared leave, or it could just be as simple as somebody has requested shared leave. It kind of depends on what that employee is comfortable releasing. So because we have kind of changed how we do this policy and how we receive leave, it was important to look at this to make sure everything complied with actually how we're doing it today. So the important thing to realize is nothing has really changed with how we're operating. It's just more we want to make sure it's clear, and that I felt like by adding this information in, it relieves the risk manager a lot of questions they're getting on the phone about this thing. It's a resource that we have our employees able to go to. So Section 8 is really just clarifying that, reorganizing it to make sure everybody understands whether they're covered or not. Obviously, it's available for any full-time employee. It's not eligible or available to any temporary or part-time employee. Qualifying reasons to receive leave. This is actually something that is important to have in here, and it's important to make sure it's right up front, because a lot of these reasons relate back to IRS regulations. IRS would tax not only the individual that receives the leave, that would be donating it, but they would also tax the individual that's utilizing it unless we kind of meet their regulatory requirements. Essentially, the qualifying reasons to receive leave are those regulatory requirements. So what it does is it now allows the employee that's donating to do it without tax penalty. So it's important that we have that right up front. That way, if we ever get audited for whatever reason, we have something to show back to the IRS in the story. Further on, we have the non-qualifying reasons, which it's more of information that we had in there, but maybe wasn't expressed quite clearly enough to where I felt that it also satisfied those IRS regulations. So we just kind of teased that out just a little bit to make sure that we cover these one-off situations, or would make folks aware of if you have something going on, but it's only temporary. It's not what's considered a serious health condition under IRS regulations. It doesn't qualify. We don't want to start granting that exception, because then it throws the IRS exemption that we have into doubt. So we just wanted to clarify that for the employees. Application policy, or the application process, we looked at what HR was currently doing with that, and we wanted to try to make sure that we were as clear as possible within our ordinance of what that process currently looks like. We took that opportunity to look at what would we like for it to look like if we had the opportunity to change anything to make it more efficient. And what you see in the application process on page 10 is what that resulted in. With the donation process, all we did was we changed the definition. And what we have been doing in the past is we've only been allowing for vacation leave or compensatory time to be utilized, but the definition that we used was accrued leave, which obviously is much larger in scope than just compensatory time or vacation leave. So we changed that
to expressly say compensatory time and vacation leave, so that way it fit with the way we've always been operating. So it's not a departure from what we've been doing. We just wanted to clarify. Moving on to page 11. It's been brought to our attention by the departments that had employees that worked 12 and 24-hour shifts that the maximums that we provided of 480 hours of donated leave were just not adequate, because these individuals burn through time at a more rapid clip than other employees. Now, it all ends up working out based on the way their shifts are scheduled, but within the time period we were looking at, we needed to adjust those to make sure that those individuals would also be covered for the full period of time that they would be working, either if they were on a 12 or 24-hour shift. We also just wanted to make clear at the bottom of page 11 that if a donated employee went ahead and authorized leave to be taken out of their accrued leave and provided to an employee under this program, that if the employee that was receiving the leave returned early, that their pro rata share that they donated would be returned to them. So there's no benefit to someone using this other than the fact that they could focus on whatever serious health condition they have, get better, get back to work, but it wasn't a windfall as a result of it, or somebody losing out based on their generosity. So we just wanted to make sure that it was clear that that unused portion would get returned to all employees that donated. The biggest part of this that I want to discuss, which had other implications other than just clarifying the leave policy, is the application to receive shared leave. I think it's down towards the bottom, Gina. 26. So the form is not much different than what it was, what's already been approved in the ordinance. What we wanted to do, though, is based on our process, is we wanted to make sure that the employees were aware that any information they provided as part of their application would be looked at by the Shared Leave Committee, which is made up of employees, and would be reviewed by the county manager and the county manager's ultimate decision to approve shared leave and what amounts. That was not very clear before, and it wasn't very clear in our policy. So what I wanted to do here was create a couple of boxes that required them to essentially initial how they wanted this to be handled. How much information did they actually want to share? I mean, it was something that was discussed, but I wanted something documented so that we had it for our file. So that's all this does, is the first box essentially authorizes the release of information, including the personnel record, any application for FMLA, as well as medical documentation provided pursuant to this policy, so that it could be processed by the Human Resources staff, the Shared Leave Committee, as well as the county manager, just for the purpose of determining approval for participation in this program. So it doesn't change anything that's already been done, but I just wanted them to notate that for us, so that way if there were any issues about, well, why'd you release this information? It's like, well, we have your signature saying we were authorized to do so. The second one, it relates to the email that goes out to all of the county employees, essentially trying to gauge how much information does the person requesting leave want to be released to the public, or to the county staff. So it's essentially saying that, yes, I allow you to release this information, saying that I or someone in my immediate family have a serious health condition, and that I desire to take part in the shared leave program. Any donations obviously would be appreciated. Or they could say, no, I don't want that to happen. Now, the obvious downside is if you choose not to do that, you may not receive any shared leave, but that has to be a decision that they make. So I just wanted that notated somewhere, so that way, once again, if somebody came back saying, I didn't want you to share that, we at least have something to say. Well, you said we could, you authorized us to do so. We did it in accordance with the application you submitted. So that's really the biggest change that we have to that application, but something I just wanted to be able to notate for our own protection and to kind of complete that record. And that's really all I had on that. If there are any questions about the changes to the policy or to the application, I'm more than happy to answer those. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So, based on all those changes, we would ask the board to adopt all the personnel ordinance changes that have been discussed here today.
Do I have a motion?
Have a motion to adopt the proposed changes for the personnel ordinance.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Everybody, oh, have a discussion, excuse me. Hearing none, everybody in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. Thank you.
And thank you very much.
Did a great job on this thing.
You did a great job, thank you.
Very, very thorough.
It was a long process with
I
everyone.
just
We got it
want
done.
to commend both of you for putting this together, because there are two things in it I've always been nervous about not having in a personnel order, and that was the discrimination clause and the sexual harassment clause, because these two things can open us up to many, many lawsuits.
Yep.
So I thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am, you're very welcome.
Next up, county manager report.
And it'll be short and sweet today for you. All I have really to talk about is the Irwin Elementary School changing schedule. We met with, well, I spoke with Tom Hughes, the architect for the new Irwin Elementary, and he sent us the revised schedule that's in your packet. The main differences start with probably the bid date. It got pushed out a few weeks, and then everything else therefore got pushed out a few weeks. So basically on the schedule before, they were supposed to start construction or be done with construction by September 24th, and now it's November 23rd of 2021. And the occupancy was, on the prior schedule, it was December 1st of 2021, and now they're gonna start school in January 2022, which is just a month later. But they've condensed their time of going through and doing the, any kind of punch list items to a shorter period to kind of try to get them on schedule to start school that January. And that was just for information only for y'all. They've still not, I don't think everything is down at the school. I think there's still that one, the media center is still partially there. And so demolition has taken a lot longer than they had anticipated as well. And that's all I have.
Do we have any new business?
Well, we're going to discuss this video thing, we talked, the email you sent.
Right, we were, I didn't know if y'all want to do it here or not, but we can discuss it. So right now, we don't have the capability to stream live videos from our room that we're in. We don't have a camera system, so we've gotten a quote from the IT department, and it was a little over $7,000. I don't remember the total for the whole system, and it would be transferable to the new building to use in our boardroom there. So that was just we were just wondering if you wanted to do it here to start streaming video as well as audio. But if you're fine with audio, we're fine with audio.
Yeah.
We were just throwing it out there as an option.
I think that's, my opinion is, the public will be back here shortly.
Okay, that's fine.
Do we have need for a closed session? That's great news. That's everybody shaking their head no. So for you who can't see us, we do not have a closed session. So do I have a motion for adjournment?
Yes, sir. I move that we adjourn.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have 2 seconds. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. We are adjourned.